Hello friends, it's Monday the 1st of July 2019. Welcome back to A Garden Named Bill. I'm changing up the formula again this week. Instead of a quick video, this is going to be a long video, and I'm going to go through every one of the vegetables that I have in the garden in the highlights time. And you can check out the times in the description below of when those are if you just want to see particular videos. So be sure to hang around and check that out and let me know what you think of this. I'm probably not going to do it every week because I have a feeling it's going to be tedious to edit, but I don't know, trying things new. So, as always, let's begin with our overview shot. I'm pleased to say that things are really picking up now. We've had some awfully humid weather, highs in the upper 80s, high humidity, and rain still, but it's been good for the tomatoes. It's been very good for the peppers. They've pretty much doubled in size, and the tomatoes are climbing nicely. Probably got 7 or 8 inches out of them last week. Overall, doing really well. Now I'm just waiting for some of my vining things to climb up the trellis and climb along the ground down there. One of my jobs this week is definitely to get some more compost and put it in here. I did, but I think it needs even more. Some of these leaves are starting to yellow at the bottom, and I'm seeing yellowing coming up in the potatoes. I think it's too early for these to be harvested, because that was what the very beginning of May, so beginning of June, July. Yeah, it's only been 60 days. We've got pretty much another month or 4 weeks left on these. So I want to give them some compost. Yep. Well, this monstrosity here was supposed to be milkweed, but it turns out, and this is a story I promised you last week, turns out the day before I got these plants were sprayed. I got them from a buddy of mine, and I knew that they were sprayed, but I thought I could, rinse them off and take care of it, and they'd transplant fine. No, you can't get around pesticides. These came from a property that he just bought and he's developing, so he's doing the right thing for his yard. I just had hoped I could get some, but that's okay. So this week I need to take these out and probably rough up the soil, and maybe I'll do another planting of radishes, or maybe start some of my fall crop of carrots in here. I've never before experienced such tremendous root outward growth of my raspberries before, so this is the third time that I need to pick up some of these plants and just get rid of them, because I have all the raspberries that I need right now. So I need to get rid of these, and then some of the stalks over the last 2 weeks. The new growth really went crazy on the raspberries, and I need to bring some of these ones in the front, kind of bend them and tuck them underneath the trellis so they stay where I want and they don't fall down with the raspberries once those start to set on. Alright, now it's time for the highlights. Remember, you can check in the description below for individual times in the video when each specific plant is coming up. So let's start with the raspberries. I thought it would be fun to stand outside of the garden and look at you through this. My fence is down here. The top of the trellis is about 4 feet, and these are coming up 2 to 3 feet on top of it. Like that one over there is taller than I am, and I'm 6'5". Some of these are right to my eyes. I have rarely had raspberries grow this tall before, so it's really, really exciting. And some of the Oaxaca, something or another raspberries that I have in here are even taller. They're sparking over 7 feet. So crazy growth now that we have this humidity, and everything is putting on fruit. So this season it seems like the hot weather loving plants are just a little bit late. In years past, I've already been harvesting raspberries at this time this week, and none of them are ripening up yet. So it might be another week or 2 before we get any. But you can see them throughout here. There's thousands of raspberries, and it'll be really fun to start picking once that time comes. The currant is growing really well. I'd say I've got 15 inches of growth from what I had originally planted earlier this spring, coming along nicely. And the lingonberry is the color that it should be. Remember when I first planted this, how it was kind of a burgundy color? It had some transplant shock. Now it's nice and green, and it's grown maybe 20% in volume, and I'm pleased. Actually, over on the other side there are some flowers, I believe. So maybe we'll get a little bit of fruit the first year on this already. The blueberry and American cranberry that I have in here are faring really well. You can see we've got some flowers in the blueberries and some nice growth. Once the soil acidifier kicked in, this whole thing turned the corner for the better. This is probably 8 inches of growth here, and I've got nice green sprouts everywhere we turn. And then in the cranberry, this is just crawling out and spreading all along, which it's supposed to do. It's supposed to be a ground cover. So I'm pleased with that. Just every now and then I pull out some weeds that are growing in, and I keep this nice and clean. I'll probably do another round of sulfur as the fall sets on, just to make sure that this maintains its acidity over the winter time. The gooseberries are doing well. This is a similar thing what I said earlier with the raspberries. This fruit should have been ripening a little while ago, but because of the weather, they're still tart and underripe, really firm. So they have to become a little bit more pale yellow with hints of burgundy before I harvest any of these. So I'm really itching to do that because I already have my big raspberry harvest, and I want to make some like a raspberry gooseberry jam and rhubarb raspberry jam and pies and those kind of things. But the plant looks really well. This year I will have to trim it. My peas are doing really nicely. I've got some sweet peas here for like stir fry, and those are ready to be harvested. But my sugar snap peas are just terrific. I've already harvested about 1,000 grams, so maybe 2.5 pounds. And I just keep coming out every 3 days or so, and I like to pick them off when they're not entirely cylindrical, a little bit thinner on one side and wider on the other. They're really very sweet, but several of these plants are well over 7 feet tall, like this one here. So the tallest plants, I'm letting several of the pods yellow up and have their seeds harden off, and then I'll save these and use them for planting next year. So we can continue this line of tall, high-producing plants. Fingers crossed. I've never been that good at seed saving before, but it is a long-term goal of mine. So why not start with the best plants, right? The corn has done well this week because of all the heat and humidity. I'd say it's almost doubled, not necessarily in its height, but in its volume for sure. Looks decent considering there is almost no corn in the fields by us. Some of these stalks are a foot high, which is nice, and only 4 of them have been eaten by squirrels or whatever else is eating it, which is fine, because if there aren't some things eating your garden, it's not really part of an ecosystem, right? The zucchini here really look terrific. I've got 2 plants that are right next to each other. I have my first actual zucchini fruit on one, and I can count 1, 2, 3, 4 other buds that have been pollinated. So this will be a nice producing clump of plants. I'm so pleased at how well this is done. This was planted from seed, and it's having no problems with any of the weather. And on either side, I've got some lovely mammoth sunflowers that were planted. The mammoth sunflower seeds have done better in these random pots and in my raised beds, far better than they have in the actual ground behind us. So next year, maybe I won't plant a row of sunflowers. I'll just intersperse them like this even more throughout the garden. But I'm glad to see that these are coming along. And the second seeding of radishes are doing nicely too. I thinned this out, if not last week, the week before, and they're growing fine. Again, we've had a lot of moisture and a lot of heat, and I mean, radishes are just so easy to grow if the soil isn't too dense. They'll take care of all the hard work. All right, now I want to show you an interesting comparison of mint plants here. So these are both the exact same variety of mint, here and here. But you see really wide leaves, tall plants, and here the plants are short and the leaves are skinny, and they're almost more firm. Again, the exact same thing. I planted mint last year, and it spreads like a weed. This is the asparagus bed, and of course I thought I pulled it all out, but I didn't. So I thought this year I'll let this grow and just see what happens. And I think because the soil here is so loose and there's so much more space, these are just growing freely and nice and bigger, whereas this is root bound and contained, and it's adapting to its environment and becoming smaller. Same species, different traits. I think that's really fascinating. And I've been using this mint way more than ever. We do sparkling water in our soda stream, and I like to mix a bunch of mint leaves with some lime juice in the water. It makes a really refreshing sparkling water, almost tastes like a tonic to me. So I'm pleased with how this is going, and I think I'm going to keep it in the mint bed, or in the asparagus bed indefinitely, because these roots are awfully shallow, and I don't think they're harming the asparagus that's growing up. Speaking of asparagus, as you can see the fronds are blowing in the wind, these are doing fine, I guess. They're not growing up any higher, more shoots aren't coming out of the ground. I'm down to 7 plants of each variety. It was 8 plants a couple weeks ago. I just weeded this early yesterday morning, well 2 days ago in the morning to be in fact, and I might have accidentally pulled off one stalk that was right here. I don't think I have anything that's getting in here and eating the plants. I'm seeing some animal tracks. That's probably a rabbit or a squirrel, but they're not digging around these. If they wanted some asparagus, they would have gotten to it already. So I don't know if that means my crowns underneath the ground just didn't take, I'll have to check it out in the spring whether they come up or not. I don't know, but it's a sparse bed this year, and it makes me a little sad, but I just have to remember it's going to fill out and it's going to be nice and dense, and in the years to come, like 3 years from now, when I've got the harvest done of all the asparagus in June, I can probably plant a row of something in here that has shallow roots to make better use of the bed in the future. By the way, if it's looking really dark in the video, if you see changes in the lights, we got a storm that's coming and I'm trying to fit this in. The sky's actually getting turquoise. It's kind of spooky. The tomatoes and peppers are both doing really well. This tomato, actually, we have some small ones sitting up. Last week it was only about this tall, and now you can see it's climbing. The single stemming that I'm doing by chopping off the stuff on the bottom and keeping it mostly to the main stem is working really well. The peppers are all growing too. I've got some specialty peppers that are on the vine, and I think they've doubled in size this week. So again, the heat and humidity is what they needed. So we talked already a little bit about the potatoes. They're growing nicely. I think I've got another 4 weeks before I'm going to be harvesting them. I need to give them a little bit more compost. And you know what? Now the rain is coming down and the winds are picking up. I think lightning's coming. We're going to pause this, and when you see me next, the lighting is going to be very different. Well, that was a lovely little thunderstorm. So now that it's done raining, let's continue where we left off. Here I've got my cauliflower that's coming up, and the heat and rain has been wonderful for it. And we finally have cauliflower heads starting as of like today or yesterday, which is really exciting to see. Of course, I'll bring you in for some camera shots so you can see what I'm talking about here, but I am excited for that. Once it gets to a certain size, like 2 of your fists put together, you eventually wrap it in the leaves. It's a blanching process to keep it white, and it keeps it tight. Otherwise, cauliflower will just shoot off and get yellow and kind of brown, and at least the stuff that I grow does. Here, behind the trellis, my cucumbers are growing nicely. They're about a foot tall, and I mean, there's not much more to say for them. I'm excited for them to get up to this point, and I'll start wrapping them around here. And again, they were kind of late to get to the game, and I think we'll just have a later, smaller harvest, but that's okay. Otherwise, I was kind of hoping to be doing some dill pickles now. The Egyptian walking onions, we have harvested a lot more of them this year than we have in the past. The very bottommost section is just a white onion. You can cut it off. It kind of gives me the impression of a leek, to be honest, because it's maybe, that wide on the bottom, and then it tapers off towards the top. But they're tasty. They're kind of sweet. And eventually these shallots at the top will turn dark brown, and when they do, those are really good for frying up with eggs and things too. On the ground by the fence here, over by the workbench, I planted a spaghetti squash, and it's a little squashed after the storm, but you can see we've got at least 2 flowers on there, which having a little tough time focusing, but we'll get some fruit on this, and maybe as the summer rolls along, this will spread out all over in this space. And then to the right of the spaghetti squash, over here, are the sweet potatoes, and they really aren't doing anything. Again, they need lots of heat, and we haven't had it, and I don't think they like the little berms that I made for them instead of a long hillage. So we'll see if anything yields from that this year. And then over in the corner, this is really tough to see, but these aren't weeds. These are blackberries that I planted, and they're finally only starting to pick up, especially the far two. But they had been brown and pathetic looking for a couple weeks, pretty much the entire month of June, and the last week of May. So hopefully they're on the up and up from here. I don't think we'll get any blackberries from them this season, but I just want them to climb and, establish good roots and be successful in the future. I did quite a fair amount of weeding to the carrots earlier this week, so some of them are tipping over a little bit more than they have in the past. Plus the rain, that just does it. Let's see. You harvest carrots like 2.5 months in from when they were planted, and I think I planted these, what was that, week 3? Essentially around the middle of April. So middle of May, middle of June, and now beginning of July. So this is about the harvesting time. So maybe this week I'm going to come in with a garden fork and see about picking just a few of them to see if they're about ready for harvest. I think they can stay in for maybe 4 weeks after they're quote unquote done growing before you really need to harvest them. But these look like they're ready to be harvested. I'm not seeing any flowers. Any carrot flowers? Oh, that's a weed. I'm not seeing any carrot flowers coming up. So they're not in there for too long. That's good. And as you can see in the frame, we've got some other mammoth sunflowers that I planted in the corners here. They seem to do really well among the carrots. And these are pushing 3 feet. Actually, that one is. So the only real good mammoth sunflowers that we'll have are here, and then in the zucchini bin, and in another section which we'll see back here in just a moment. Beets are really similar to carrots as far as their seed to harvest time is concerned, 60 to 80 days, and we are within that window now. And the leaves look really mature. As I pull things to the side, I can kind of see the top of some beets. I want them to ideally be about golf ball size. So similar to the carrots, this week I'm going to come in with a garden fork, loosen up the soil, and pull a couple of them to see if they're there. And if they are, they're all going to get harvested. And I need to find some recipes to use these beet leaves with. Again, I think they'll cook up kind of like Swiss chard, or we'll find a recipe for it. But I want to get these out of the way because they're covering up this row of spinach from the second seeding. This row is doing just fine. And actually some of these real outer edge ones I could probably harvest for some tender leaves, but we're finishing off the freezer bag from the first harvest earlier this year still, and that freezing process worked really nicely for me. And I'm glad that the second seeding has been successful. And in another couple of weeks these will be this tall, and we'll probably just harvest the whole thing again, and by that time I'll probably replant this whole area. I'm thinking the end of July or the beginning of August for my fall garden. This year for sure I'm just going to plant a ton of carrots and a decent amount of spinach and radishes again. But to be honest, I think I might replant this entire raised bed with just carrots, because we go through so many carrots over the fall, winter, and spring in all of the stews and soups and things that we make. And they keep so easily, seriously. Just in the basement, in some sand, in a dark place, they're really excellent. We've learned over the years on how to take care of them, and every year we get a little bit better at using more and more of the things that we produce. So, that's another fun part of the gardening journey. Great. Good conversation. Good content. Well, the pole beans are all doing well. Also, this entire stretch here, this is the garden gate, in here is pole beans. Some of them, this one is already, past 4 feet. The rest of these are 2 and 3 feet. Looks like maybe 2 of the plants didn't happen over here, so this space might be bare, but that's okay. I think it's so neat and beautiful to watch beans climb. They're the most successful climbers in my garden, in my opinion. They send these little stalks up and they just go spiraling upwards. It's pretty neat. So these are all green beans. So these will go, and they'll go all the way to the top of the arch essentially, and then kind of climb up and fall over on the side once they get too heavy. But they will continue to produce all year until the frost, so long as I'm pinching them off and using them, which is really cool. And I think it's in frame. Yeah, over here you can kind of see another one of the mammoth sunflowers. It got a little droopy just now from the storm, but that'll perk up. Is that the last one? Well, there's one in the corner over here too by the peas. So that one might not do well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. For sure, good-looking sunflowers. Way late in the season for us just because of this weird spring weather we had. This last chunk here is kind of tough to get in frame. Let's just call this the squash section. We've got 2 different kinds of squash. We've got a butternut squash, a coconut squash. I think I've got watermelon down there, or cantaloupe. The other one is a small watermelon, and then ornamental gourds. And again, they love the heat. So these have essentially doubled in size this week, which is nice. They're up to the 1.5 foot mark, let's say, the big tall ones. So now this is the time they actually have tendrils that are coming out, ready to grab onto something. And that's how how I use them to train them up on the arch trellis here. Otherwise, if this was a ground cover, now's the time when they would start crawling and spreading out like crazy. So as these weeks progress along, I'll be weaving these in and out. These are a little bit more laborious to train, but it's doable. It just takes time, and you got to watch it if it's after a pretty bad storm until they've gone in and out of the trellis 2 or 3 times. Then they're fine. So yeah, if this hot weather continues, this 80s and so on for the next several weeks, the garden will continue to explode. I'm pretty pleased with the growth that's happened over this last week. Well, as they say, that's all she wrote. So that's it for me today. Thanks for sticking along. I know this is a longer video than normal. Tell me what you think about this itemizing every single vegetable format. I might try it again maybe once a month. We'll see how tedious it actually was to edit. Thank you to everybody who has submitted their viewer submission photos or videos. It was a way better turnout than I thought. At first, last week, Monday, all of last week's videos were pre-programmed and scheduled earlier because I was traveling. I was actually in Michigan with the family. And after the first video went on Monday, I had one person, a gentleman from Slovenia, email me, so you'll see some of his footage when this goes live. And then nobody. And then on Thursday, I think we had 3 or 4 people submit things. So that's going to be pretty cool. I'm collecting those, I think, for the next 3 days, maybe until the 4th of July. Even though I said the deadline was today, a couple people said they were traveling, wouldn't be able to get me things for a few days. And then I'll edit that at the end of this week, and then that'll be scheduled for my birthday on Thursday, the 11th of July. So thank you, everybody, for submitting your viewer videos and pictures. If this goes well and has a good response, we'll probably do something similar in maybe October, and we'll do a harvest, viewer submission, where you just send pictures and videos of like your showmanly pictures of you with a big bushel of carrots or a big bushel of tomatoes. Those kind of pictures. I think they're really cool and inspiring. So, looking forward to that. Yeah, happy gardening. Thanks a lot. Take care, guys. Bye.